Hey everyone! What if I told you that a normal-looking quarter in your pocket could be worth thousands of dollars? It's true. In this video, I'll show you 5 super rare Washington quarters that people have sold for big money. Watch till the end, you might have one at home. Alright, let's get started with our first ultra-rare Washington quarter, the 1965 Washington quarter with no mint mark. Valued at up to $15,500. Now, you might be thinking, what's so special about a 1965 quarter? After all, they made millions of them, right? Well, here's the thing, 1965 was a major turning point for U.S. coins. It was the first year that the U.S. Mint started using a copper-nickel-clad composition for quarters, instead of the traditional 90% silver they had been using for decades. This was part of a larger shift in U.S. currency due to the rising cost of silver, which led to the government deciding to produce coins with a mix of copper and nickel. So, why does this make the 1965 quarter special? While most of the 1965 quarters were struck with the new copper-nickel mix, some of them were accidentally struck on leftover silver planchets from the previous year, 1964. These leftover silver planchets were meant to be melted down and repurposed for other coins, but somehow, a few of them ended up being used to strike the 1965 quarters. This is where the magic happens, and it's what makes this particular quarter worth so much. What makes the 1965 Washington quarter so valuable? You might be asking yourself, why is this error so valuable? The main reason is because of its rarity and the fact that it's a transitional error. When the U.S. Mint switched over to the new copper-nickel composition in 1965, it was a big deal. The 1965 quarter should have been made with the new copper-nickel composition, but the silver version of the coin that was struck by mistake is much rarer. Think about it, a typical 1965 quarter is made from the new copper-nickel material, but when you find one that's made from 90% silver, it becomes a collector's dream. This mistake creates a coin that's a transitional relic from a time when the U.S. Mint was undergoing major changes to its coin production process. Coins like this are rare and highly sought after because they offer a glimpse into U.S. history at a critical time. How can you identify the 1965 silver Washington quarter? Now, how do you know if you've got one of these silver 1965 quarters? It can be tricky since the coin may look very similar to a regular 1965 quarter at first glance. But there are a few key signs to look for. Weight. The first thing you'll want to check is the weight of the coin. Regular 1965 quarters, made from copper-nickel, weigh about 5.67 grams. However, the silver 1965 quarters, the ones made with that leftover silver, will weigh about 6.25 grams, which is about half a gram heavier. That's because the silver planchets are denser than the copper-nickel ones. So, if you have a 1965 quarter that's heavier than usual, it might be the silver version you're looking for. Sound. Another way to tell if a 1965 quarter is made from silver is by the way it sounds when dropped. Silver quarters have a distinctive higher-pitched ping when dropped, while copper-nickel quarters have a duller sound. If you drop a 1965 quarter and it makes a sound that seems different from other quarters, there's a chance it could be one of these rare silver-struck coins. Shiny silver edge. If you hold a 1965 quarter under good light, pay attention to the edge of the coin. Silver coins have a shiny silver edge with no copper stripe, while copper-nickel coins will have a visible copper stripe around the edge. If the edge looks silver and shiny, then it's likely to be a silver 1965 quarter. Why are these coins so valuable? So why do collectors care so much about these silver-struck 1965 quarters? It all comes down to rarity and collectability. Most of the 1965 quarters that were produced were made with copper-nickel, but a very small number of them were mistakenly struck on leftover silver planchets from 1964. This makes the silver 1965 quarter a rare error coin that can attract a lot of attention at auctions. Because these coins are part of a historical transition in U.S. coinage, they carry additional significance. The 1965 quarters represent a shift from silver to copper-nickel, marking the end of an era in U.S. coin production. Collectors love to own coins that have such a unique backstory, and they're willing to pay a premium price for a coin that can't be found just anywhere. Plus, the condition of the coin also plays a major role in its value. A high-grade coin, one that is in excellent condition with minimal wear, will fetch a much higher price than a coin that is scratched or heavily worn. A 1965 silver quarter that is in great condition could easily be worth $15,500, as one such coin was sold at auction for that amount. The rarity, historical importance, and condition of these coins come together to create serious value. The big sale. One of the most impressive sales of a 1965 silver quarter occurred when a high-grade specimen fetched $15,500 at auction. That's a huge amount for a coin that originally only cost 25 cents. It just goes to show that the value of a coin can skyrocket based on its rarity and collector demand. If you think you might have a 1965 quarter that's different from the rest, it's definitely worth taking a closer look. Check the weight, the sound, and the edge of the coin to see if it could be one of these ultra-rare silver errors. You never know, you might just have a $15,500 coin sitting in your pocket change. Up next, at number 4 on our list, is the 1970 D Washington quarter, which is worth up to a staggering $15,000. At first glance, this coin might look like any other quarter, especially since it was minted in Denver, hence the D mint mark. But don't be fooled, this quarter is far from ordinary. So, what makes the 1970 D Washington quarter so special? The value comes from a rare minting error that makes this coin highly sought after by collectors. But before we get into the details of that error, let's take a step back and talk a little about the history behind this coin. In 1970, the U.S. Mint was busy making millions of quarters for circulation, and like most years, a large portion of them were made at the Denver Mint, which is why you see the D mint mark on the 1970 D quarters. Most of these quarters are not worth much more than their face value of 25 cents. But, as sometimes happens at the mint, a mistake occurred. Some of the 1970 D quarters were accidentally struck over 1941 Canadian quarters. You might be thinking, wait, what? Yep, you heard that right. Some of the 1970 D quarters were struck on leftover planchets from Canadian coins made in 1941. This mistake happened because the mint workers grabbed the wrong planchets from storage. So, what exactly is the big deal about this? Well, when a 1970 D quarter is struck over a 1941 Canadian quarter, the result is a double strike or overstrike error. This means that part of the old Canadian coin design, which was on the planchet before the 1970 D quarter design was stamped over it, shows through. If you look carefully at one of these error coins under a magnifying glass, you'll see faint traces of the 1941 Canadian design beneath the Washington quarter's image. It's kind of like a ghost of the old design still hanging around underneath the new one. These ghostly outlines are what collectors go crazy for. You might even be able to spot some doubled letters or parts of the Canadian coat of arms that didn't completely disappear when the new quarter was struck over the old coin. This is a clear sign that the coin you're looking at isn't just any regular 1970 D quarter, it's a rare, valuable error. The reason this particular error makes the 1970 D Washington quarter so valuable is that it's extremely rare. These overstruck coins are hard to find because they were made during a very specific mistake, and only a small number of these double-strike quarters were ever released into circulation. Even today, these error coins are still quite rare and hard to come by. In fact, one of these 1970 D double-strike quarters sold for an incredible $15,000 at auction. That's right, $15,000 for a quarter that most people would think is just a regular coin. This just goes to show that even small mistakes during the minting process can lead to coins that are worth a fortune. So, how can you tell if you found one of these super rare error coins? Here's what to look for. Check the mint mark. The 1970 D quarter has a D mint mark, which means it was made at the Denver Mint. Look closely at the mint mark to make sure it's clear and sharp. Inspect the design under magnification. Use a magnifying glass or a jeweler's loupe to carefully examine the coin. If you notice faint outlines or parts of the Canadian design showing through the Washington quarter design, you've got a double strike error on your hands. Look for ghostly details. The most obvious sign of this error is the ghostly outlines of the 1941 Canadian quarter, which should be visible under magnification. You might see parts of the Canadian coat of arms or other features from the old design peeking through. Check for double letters or numbers. In some cases, the doubling effect might make parts of the coin design look a little off. The letters or numbers on the coin might appear doubled or distorted, which can be a sign that the coin was struck over another coin. Now, even if you don't have a magnifying glass handy, it's still a good idea to check any 1970 quarters you come across. While it's rare to find one of these double strike errors, it's worth keeping an eye out. If you do find one, and it's in good condition, you could be holding a coin that's worth thousands of dollars, just like the $15,000 auction sale we mentioned earlier. So, if you've got a 1970 quarter in your collection, take a close look. It could be worth far more than you ever imagined. Now, coming in at number 3 on our list is the 1988 Washington quarter, a coin that could be worth up to $4,250. It might surprise you to hear that a quarter from the 1980s could fetch that kind of money. After all, 1988 isn't exactly ancient when it comes to coins. But some error coins from that year are worth big bucks, and we're about to break down exactly why. First off, let's talk about the basics. This quarter was minted at the Denver Mint, which is where the D Mint mark comes from. So, this is a 1988 Washington quarter, just like many of the regular quarters you might have in your pocket. But here's the thing, some of the 1988 quarters have errors that make them incredibly rare and valuable to collectors. So, what are these errors, and why do they make the coin so special? Well, there are a few different types of errors that can happen during the minting process, and some of these errors make the coins unique and highly desirable. The key errors found in the 1988 Washington quarter are off-center strikes. One of the most common errors found in 1988 quarters is an off-center strike. This happens when the coin is struck by the press but isn't perfectly lined up with the planchet, the blank piece of metal that gets stamped into a coin. When this happens, part of the design gets cut off, and the coin looks like it's been shifted to one side. These off-center coins are quite rare, and collectors love them because they're not just ordinary coins, they've got a unique look. Missing layers. Another error that can occur is when the coin is missing some of its layers. Normally, a quarter has a copper-nickel composition, but sometimes, during the minting process, a quarter might lose part of its surface layer. This means the coin might have visible areas where the metal looks like it's been peeled away or just didn't get fully struck with the design. This kind of error makes the coin stand out, and collectors love finding these rare, oddball coins. Clipped planchets. A clipped planchet happens when a quarter is struck on a planchet that has part of its edge missing. This can happen if the blank coin stock, planchet, was improperly cut before it was sent to be struck. When this happens, the coin will have a curved, clipped edge that makes it look like part of the quarter is missing. These types of coins are highly collectible because they're a result of a mistake at the mint, and that rarity drives up their value. So, while these errors can occur in various ways, the most important thing for their value is condition. If the error is dramatic, meaning the off-center strike or clipped edge is very noticeable and the coin is in excellent condition, then collectors are willing to pay thousands of dollars for it. For example, one particularly rare 1988 Washington quarter with a dramatic error sold for an incredible $4,250 at auction. That's a lot of money for a coin from just a few decades ago. But that's the kind of premium error coins can command if they have the right combination of rarity, condition, and collector demand. Now, you might be wondering, how can you tell if your 1988 quarter has one of these rare errors? Here's what to look for: off-center strike. Look closely at the design of the coin. If you notice that part of the design is cut off or shifted to one side, you could have an off-center strike. These coins often have a part of the design missing, like part of the Washington portrait or the lettering, and they are a dead giveaway that it's a rare error. Missing layers. For missing layers, check the surface of the coin. If you see any areas where the metal looks like it's peeling or there are shiny, smooth patches without design detail, you may have a missing layer error. Clipped planchet. A clipped planchet is easy to spot because it'll have a curved or jagged edge. If the edge of your quarter looks like part of it is cut off or missing, then you could have a clipped planchet error on your hands. Remember, condition matters a lot. Even if you have one of these rare errors, if the coin is in poor condition, like being really worn down or scratched up, it might not be worth much. But if the coin is in great shape, with clear error features, it could be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. So, next time you're looking through your change, take a moment to check any 1988 D quarters you come across. You might just be holding on to a coin that's worth a small fortune. Next up at number 2, we've got the 1977 Washington quarter with no mint mark, and this coin is worth up to $10,000. Yes, you heard that right, a quarter from 1977 can be worth 10 grand. But, how is that possible? Let's break it down. When it comes to US coins, the mint mark is an important detail. Normally, quarters that are minted in Philadelphia don't have a mint mark at all. For example, coins made there during the 1970s, like this 1977 quarter, don't have a mint mark, while those made at the Denver or San Francisco mints would have a D or S mint mark. So, this particular 1977 quarter doesn't have a mint mark, which tells us it was minted in Philadelphia. But the real value of this 1977 quarter doesn't come from the fact that it was made in Philadelphia or from the lack of a mint mark. The big value comes from how it was made, the minting errors that happened during its creation. Some of these errors are rare and very valuable, making these coins highly desirable among collectors. So, what exactly makes this 1977 quarter so special? There are a few types of minting mistakes that can happen during the production process, and some of these were found on the 1977 quarters, making them more valuable than you might think. Struck on the wrong planchet. One of the most common errors that happen with older quarters is when they get struck on the wrong planchet. Planchets are the blank metal discs that are stamped with the coin's design to make the final coin. Normally, quarters are struck on a planchet meant for a quarter, but sometimes, mistakes happen, and quarters get struck on wrong planchets. Some of the 1977 Washington quarters were struck on planchets that were meant for nickels or even foreign coins. A nickel planchet is a little smaller and thicker than a quarter planchet, so when it gets struck with the quarter's design, the coin looks different. It can be slightly off in size, thickness, and weight. This type of error makes the coin unique because it's not a standard 1977 quarter. If you find one of these quarters, you've got something that's really rare and highly collectible. These kinds of errors can significantly increase the coin's value, especially if the error is clearly visible. Double die errors. Another kind of error that can happen during the minting process is called a double die error. This happens when the design is accidentally stamped twice, resulting in a doubling effect on parts of the coin. For the 1977 quarter, some of these coins were struck with a double die, meaning you could see double images on parts of the design, especially in areas like the lettering or the date. For example, the Liberty or In God We Trust part of the coin might show double letters, making them look slightly blurry or doubled up. This is a clear sign that the coin has a minting error, and collectors go wild for these kinds of errors because they're not only rare, but they make the coin visually interesting and unique. Misalignments. Another type of minting error that could have happened with the 1977 Washington quarter is a misalignment. This occurs when the design is stamped off-center or when the die, the metal tool used to strike the design, is slightly out of alignment. When this happens, the image or lettering on the coin isn't perfectly centered, which can make the coin look strange but unique. Misalignments can vary, from slight ones where the design is just a little bit off-center, to more extreme misalignments where the design might be far from centered. These types of misalignments are very rare and, like other errors, are highly sought after by collectors. Why do collectors love these errors? Now, you might be wondering why people are willing to pay so much for a 1977 quarter with one of these errors. The answer is simple: collectors love rare and unique coins. A coin that has a mistake during the minting process is considered special because it's not like the others. Minting errors make the coin unique, and that uniqueness makes the coin valuable to collectors. When it comes to the 1977 Washington quarter, collectors especially love these types of errors when the coin is in great condition. Condition is extremely important in the world of coin collecting because a coin that is in near perfect shape is worth much more than a coin that is worn down or damaged. For example, One rare 1977 Washington quarter that had a significant minting error and was in excellent condition sold for a jaw-dropping $10,000. That's a huge premium for a coin that originally only cost a quarter. How can you tell if you have one? So, how can you tell if you've got one of these rare 1977 quarters? Here's what you should look for: wrong planchet. Check the weight, size, and thickness of the coin. If the coin feels heavier or thicker than a regular quarter, it could have been struck on the wrong planchet. Double die errors. Look closely at the lettering and the date on the coin. If you notice double images or parts of the design looking blurry or duplicated, you might have a double die error. Misalignments. Check the overall alignment of the coin's design. If the design seems off-center or misaligned, it could be a misaligned strike error. And here it is, the number one most expensive and ultra-rare Washington quarter, the 1966 Washington quarter with no mint mark, valued at a jaw-dropping $21,000. Now, you might be wondering, what makes this 1966 quarter so special? It's all about a rare minting error that occurred during a very important time in U.S. coin history. Let me take you through the story behind this ultra-rare coin and explain why it can be worth such a massive fortune. The transition from silver to copper-nickel. The year 1966 was a critical year for U.S. coins. This was the year the U.S. Mint was transitioning away from using silver in its coins. For decades, quarters had been made with a 90% silver composition, but starting in 1965, the Mint began using a copper-nickel clad composition instead, which was cheaper and easier to produce. However, during this changeover, a few mistakes were made. As the Mint started producing coins with the new copper-nickel composition, there were still some leftover silver planchets, the blank discs of metal used to make coins, from previous years. These leftover silver planchets should have been melted down or used for other coins, but some of them ended up being used to make 1966 quarters, and that's where the magic happens. What makes the 1966 Washington quarter unique? Now, here's the kicker. While most 1966 quarters are made of copper-nickel, a small number of them were mistakenly struck on leftover silver planchets. This makes them highly collectible, because they're a rare transitional error. They're supposed to be copper-nickel, but instead, they have the same silver content as the 1964 and earlier quarters. Imagine that, a 1966 quarter that looks like any other, but it's actually made of silver, a mistake that makes it incredibly rare and valuable. So how can you tell if you have one of these silver-filled 1966 quarters? Let's dive into the details. How to identify the 1966 silver quarter. First, let's start with the mint mark, or in this case, the lack of one. Typically, quarters from the Philadelphia Mint, the one without a mint mark, were struck without any mint mark, while those from the Denver Mint had a D mint mark, and those from the San Francisco Mint had an S mint mark. But here's the thing, the 1966 quarter without a mint mark is what we're focusing on. Why? Because this was the first year the U.S. Mint stopped putting mint marks on coins from Philadelphia. And it's important because only a handful of 1966 quarters were struck on silver planchets, and most of them were made at the Philadelphia Mint. When you look at your 1966 quarter, check to see if it has no mint mark. If it does, then you've got the kind of quarter that might have been struck on a leftover silver planchet. But there's one more key thing to keep in mind: weight. A standard 1966 quarter, which is made of copper-nickel, weighs about 5.67 grams. But if you happen to have a silver 1966 quarter, it will weigh about 6.25 grams, the same weight as a quarter from 1964 or earlier, when they were made from 90% silver. This weight difference is a huge clue that you may have one of these ultra-rare silver error coins. You can easily use a digital scale to check the weight of your 1966 quarter. If it's heavier than the normal 5.67 grams, you might just have a silver-filled 1966 quarter on your hands. Why is the 1966 silver quarter so valuable? Now that you know how to spot a potential 1966 silver quarter, you're probably wondering, why is it worth so much? Well, the value of these coins comes down to rarity, condition, and historical significance. First, there's the rarity factor. Because only a small number of 1,966 quarters were mistakenly struck on leftover silver planchets, they are incredibly rare. The U.S. Mint produced millions of 1966 quarters, but only a few of them were silver. This makes them very hard to find and incredibly valuable to collectors who specialize in minting errors. Then there's the condition. For a coin to fetch top dollar, it has to be in good condition. A quarter that's heavily worn or damaged won't be worth nearly as much as one that's in high grade, like MS-65 or higher. The coin's design should be clearly visible, and it should have minimal wear. The better the condition, the higher the value. Finally, there's the historical significance. The 1966 quarter marks a turning point in U.S. coinage history, as it represents the transition from silver to copper-nickel. Because of this historical importance, these silver-filled 1966 quarters are even more valuable to collectors who love to have pieces from key moments in coin history. The big sale. And here's the real kicker, one of these ultra-rare 1966 silver quarters in excellent condition sold for an amazing $21,000 at auction. This just shows how much collectors are willing to pay for a coin with such a unique story behind it. A small mistake during the minting process turned a standard quarter into an incredibly valuable piece of history. So, if you happen to come across a 1966 Washington quarter without a mint mark, make sure to weigh it and carefully inspect it. If it's heavier than the usual 5.67 grams, you might just have a silver-filled quarter worth a small fortune. Conclusion. So there you have it, 5 Washington quarters that could turn your change into cold hard cash. From 1965 to 1988, these coins are worth way more than 25 cents, if you've got the right one. Got any interesting quarters in your collection? Drop a comment below and let us know, you never know what treasure you might be holding. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a coin worth big money. Thanks for watching, and happy collecting.